So now let's just introduce you to R and let you start doing a little bit of finding your way around RStudio. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a tour of RStudio, and then you're going to start typing in data and doing some calculations on it. So what I'm going to do first is switch my screen to RStudio. So what you're looking at here is RStudio. So you should have installed this already. And you open it from the Start menu, down at the bottom of your screen. And what I'm going to talk you through first is all these windows we've got. So what we're looking at here to start with is 4 different windows. We've got this first window on the left-hand side here, and this is the console. And this is where our commands get executed and run. So any command that you type into R is run at this particular place. This little arrowy thing here that I'm just highlighting, you see, this is called the prompt, and you don't have to type that. And it's when the prompt comes back and is flashing like it is there, that tells you that R is ready for a command. In the top right, we've got several different windows. One is called the environment window, and this is where we see objects that get created in R. I'll show you one there in a minute. We've also got a history. Yours will be empty, mine's got some stuff in with previous R commands in it. And then at the bottom, we've got a window, one of which is a file explorer. So here's all your files. I've got a path here, or a description of where my files are. I'm on my desktop at the moment. You can see just there, moving my mouse around. And there's all the files I've got on my desktop. And then this is where we also get hold of the help manuals, help pages. And it's also going to be where our plots go when we start producing plots in the viewer window there. So how do we start typing commands? So we can use R just like a calculator, and you should be able to code along with me here, I think. So I'm just going to do 3 + 4 and press enter. So it's pressing enter that sends that command to be executed. So a couple of things to note here. One is that I've got a space between the 3 and the plus. Okay, that's actually optional. It works just as well without the space, but it's considered good practice to include it. So, because it makes your code more readable. Part of the whole point of doing your work reproducible is that it's readable for you later and for people you collaborate with. So second thing to note here is that your answer comes out here, and you've got this number 1 in square brackets. So this is just indicating that what you've got out, there's only one thing. It's actually indicating the index of the output. So let me try and explain that a little bit better. So if I was going to put in a lot of numbers, let's go from number 30 through to 200. Or maybe that's a bit big. Let's go 130. There we go. So 3:130 means print out all the numbers from 3 to 130. I press enter, and that's what it's done. And because that's a lot of numbers, it's had to wrap the text at some point. So it's got to number 18, and then it's had to wrap. And this number here is the index it wrapped at. So 19 is the 17th number in the list of numbers from 3 to 130. So all this is telling you is where you are in the output. So we can also assign values to variables. So instead of typing out numbers, what we normally do is just assign some of our values to variables so that we can use them later on. So I might assign a value of 3 to a variable called x. So the assignment operator, which is this thing at the bottom here, this arrow, you can get by doing Alt-. So that's something you might just want to note down on a piece of paper. Perhaps I'll just put it in the chat here. Alt-. So that's a shortcut. Alt- is a shortcut for that arrow. And then I'm going to put the number 3 and then press enter. So that means put the value of 3 inside this variable called x. And at this point, we can go up to our environment window and see that that has indeed been created. So we now have a variable called x with a value 3 in. And we can use that value, that variable in calculations in the same way as we would use a number. So if I want to multiply that by that value x by 2, I use a star for the multiplication and then I'm going to put 2, and it's going to give me the number 6, which is 3 times 2. So I could also assign a variable, let's say y. I'm going to assign the value of 7. And you might notice here actually that because I did this assignment, there's no output. So the command has run, but it's not actually printed anything because I've done the assignment. So I just get the prompt back straight away. So just because nothing appears to happen at the prompt doesn't mean you haven't been successful. It just means there was no output to produce. But we do still have y up in our environment window up here. So I've got those two variables there, and now I can use them in a calculation. So I'm going to do y plus x. And there it's giving me the value 10, just as you'd expect. So with R, we have the opportunity to recall commands that we've put in previously. So let's suppose that I was doing an addition and it missed the X key and I put in a Z accidentally. So I'm going to get an error when I do this. And the error is, and this is one of the nice clear errors that R will give you, they're not always this clear, is that the object Z is not found. So that's saying, go up to your environment window and you can see here that there's nothing called Z, so R can't do anything with that. And you think, oh, I've made a mistake, I'd like to correct that. So you can use the up arrows. So if you use the up arrow down on your keyboard, that will record, whoops, let me just make sure I've got the cursor in the right place, the previous command you put in. And then you can use another arrow to alter or edit that command. So I'm going to edit that now and put X so that it now runs. Okay. So you have access to all the commands you put in previously. So if you keep pressing that up arrow, you'll keep going up through the commands that you've put in. And if you're looking for a particular one, that's where you can use your history. So we can go up to the history window on this top right-hand side here. And here you can see all the commands that I've previously put in. So whilst this history is useful in a way, it gives you an idea of everything you've put in. When we're coding in R, about 95% of what you put in is wrong. And that's not just because you're a beginner, that's me as well. So most of what I type is wrong because essentially you keep typing until you get it right and then you can move on to the next thing. And then you type it wrong a few more times and then you get that right and then you can move on to the next thing. So 99% of what we write, or maybe not quite that much, is wrong the first time and we have to correct it. And we don't really want a record of everything we've done that's wrong. What we really want is to have a record of everything that we've done that's right. I am going to show you how we manage that. And what we do is we use a script instead. So instead of typing in the console here, we click on this button up the top here where there's a little green circle with a white plus. You're going to click on that and choose R script. And that opens a new window, which currently says that it's untitled. And this is where we might want to type our commands instead. So let's say I'd done that Y plus Z here. And then to get the command to the console for running, you have to have your cursor on the line and you can press this run button and that will just run that one line. Or you can see if you hover over it there, it's telling you what the shortcut is, which is Control Enter. So if your cursor's on the line and you go Control Enter, it'll run that command down at the console. So just typing the commands into the script doesn't make R run them. You have to send them to the console. So you type in here, then Control Enter, and they'll get executed in the console. So that means instead of typing in the command again correctly, we just edit this one. So I'm going to edit the Z out and put X, and then run it again. So now it's correct. And I can just get rid of that there. Now it's correct. And what I'll have at the end of my session is a script file that has everything in it that worked, because I've edited and corrected everything that didn't. So the other nice thing about a script file is that you can comment in it. And comments are bits of text which are not code, and you can comment your code as much as you like. So here I'm doing an addition. Probably a bit more than I would need. So anything after a hash on that line is treated as a comment. And you can see it's got a different font here, which is the other nice thing about using a script, is that you get some syntax highlighting, which says this is just a comment. It's not going to try and treat it as code. If I try and run that line, nothing will happen. So it gets printed to the screen, but nothing's actually happened. So we'll just talk a little bit now about variable types. To start with, I'm going to show you your first function, probably. So the first function we're going to use, which is one that I use all the time, is str. And it stands for structure, and it allows you to find out what kind of type your variable is. So if I'm going to do strx and then run that, and at the bottom here it's telling me that it's just a number 3. So we have different types, data types in R, like you do in other programming languages. The ones you might use most often are numbers and strings or characters. So I can make a variable, let's call it, I'm calling the variable word. I'm going to do Alt- to get that shortcut. And then to say that it's a string, I'm going to open some quotes. And you can see that R has automatically put closed quotes in for me to help me not make a mistake. So what word shall I choose? So let's choose great, there we go. So I'm going to run that. And now what I've got here, if you look in my environment window now, is a value which has the string great inside it. And if I have a look at what variable type that is, what type of variable is word, it's telling me that this is a character variable. So characters and numbers are probably the most common data types that you'll use, although they're not quite the only ones. And then we also have what you might call data structures. So how those data are organized into particular structures for dealing with. So here we've just got what we call atomic vectors. So they've only got one thing in them. More commonly, we have lists of numbers. So let me just call it numbers, that might make sense. So I'm just going to make a vector, which we called numbers, and we give it several numbers. So instead of just giving it the number 3, I'm going to give it a collection of numbers. So let's say it's got 3, 5, 1, 8. That'll do me. So unfortunately, we can't do that on its own. It will throw an error. What we have to do is collect those things together. And the way you do that is with another function, which begins with which is just the letter C. So this is a really unusual function in R, in having only one letter for its name. So because of that, occasionally causes confusion. So, but C is just a function, like str is a function structure. So what I'm doing here is making a vector of numbers. Okay, I could have called it anything I like. I've called it numbers. I'm going to run that now. And there I have in my environment something called numbers, which has 4 elements in it, that 1 to 4, 1:4 is the indices of those, and I have 4 different things in there. And I can make a vector of characters as well. So if I was to do names, I can do, think of some names. Yeah. Oops. And let's go Bob. I run that bit of code. I've now got another variable called names in it, which is a character vector. So numbers is a numerical vector and names is a character vector. So this is beginning to look a little bit more like how you'd expect data to be. Except the way we normally have our data stored in R is in what's called a data frame. So a data frame is the most common way of having data in R. And a data frame is a collection of variables that are all the same length. So I could put these two things into one single structure, which is a data frame. I'm going to call it DF, do the assignment, and then create a data frame from those by typing the two vectors with names inside this data frame function. So data.frame is just another function, one of our first functions here. So when I run this code, that's put those two variables inside a structure called a data frame, and that's it. You can see at the top there is now listed as data. And it says it's got 4 rows, 4 observations, and 2 variables. And if you click on that arrow down there, you can see the list of variables inside there. So that hasn't got rid of the vectors. So we have both vectors called names and numbers, but a data frame also has those in. You can click on that DF and get a spreadsheet-like view behind your script or in front of your script window of that data. Okay, so this is now looking a bit more like something that you'd expect to be using in a data processing bit of software. One thing I want to show you is that you can see at the moment I've got this white, which might be how you like to work in R or in coding in general. If you want to look like a real coder, then one thing you might want to do is change your appearance. So if you go to the Tools menu on the top and then click Global Options, you have an option here to change the appearance of your code. So there's a button there that says Appearance, and in this editor theme here, so you can change this to a different color. So one way you could help yourself feel like a real coder is to change the color straight away. So I like Solarized Dark. There's also Pastel Dark, and you can change these to something form you like. So somebody's asked what happens if you have different numbers of numbers and names. So in terms of making the actual vectors, it's no problem at all. So if I just add another number into here, let's say number 6, that will run fine, and the names will run fine. And if we look at our values down here, I've got something with 4 values in and something with 5 values. When I come to make the data frame, it's going to throw an error. So the error I'm getting there is that the arguments have different numbers of rows. Okay, so a data frame has to have the same number of elements in every column, which is similar to, if anybody's used SPSS before, it's similar to the way that enforces a rectangular data structure as well. So let me move back to my slides. I think I've covered everything there. So just to recap quickly the panels, on the top left is where your script is, and where you write code and edit code and any comments that you want, and you should comment as liberally as you like. But where the codes get actually executed is in the bottom panel, the console. So normally we type at the top and we send to the console. And then in the top right is where you can see all the objects you've created and also a history of everything you've done so far, including everything that was wrong. And in the bottom right, you have a file explorer, and you also have a list of all the packages you have installed and can install packages through that window as well, the help manual and where the plots are.